Yes, Mr. Lascars.
I think it's important that we we put down there right now which school or schools are maintained by the district and registered with the DOE.
Certainly. The school of record would be Manchester. Wouldn't it?
Well, Madam Chair, I have a question because this board voted to make Pinkerton. I don't want to misquote that motion. I thought the motion was to make Pinkerton our school of record.
And not
And that was the last vote that I'm aware of. And I don't know whether that made Manchester not our school of record or it added another.
I'll see what the superintendent, if you could clarify that for us, please.
Yeah, there are some terms that we throw around a little bit. Manchester and Pinkerton, we have tuition agreements with both. The enrollment agreement is in fact a tuition agreement. So both are maintained by the school, Hooksett School District. The action taken by the board was that Pinkerton would be the school of record, which means the default school to which students would be assigned. So this past year, we assigned all our youngsters to Pinkerton, and they selected something different.
Right.
Yes, Mr. Sullivan.
I have a question on that, and that was one of my, I have 3 pages of thoughts, the questions that we'll get hopefully somewhere, or they may be duplicate. On the, I wrote down what are the criteria in determining what school is the record, if there's any guideline, and if there is any, we should know that. If the board, which the past board, I don't want to go back, but can the board use any criteria? And my other thought would be, granted we have a good freshman class going down to Derry. My thought would, should it be, just throwing it out, should it be based on the school, that district that currently has the highest enrollments, and then as it works its way over, because we still have sophomores, juniors, and seniors attending Manchester, which is in larger numbers, so we're, to me, it seems strange that a school that has a lower number would be the school maintained that we use and base the base rate on. That was just my thoughts I wrote down on that.
Want me to explain that?
Certainly. Would you,
No,
Superintendent?
I understand the question. There are 2 districts, there are 2 schools maintained by the Hooksett School District. What that means is we have a tuition agreement with them, period. We made up the term school of record. We meant it, I think that means many things to many people. I think more often we refer to the school of record as the default school to which we assign our youngsters. So you could have theoretically an unlimited number of schools maintained by the district. You would then have to decide how you were going to assign kids to those schools. This community, this board, the board, has decided to assign all its youngsters to Pinkerton this past year. And that was the school of record. That's a made-up term. What you really need to be thinking about is what schools are maintained by the district, meaning you have an agreement, and how do you determine how you assign? And the answer to your question is yes. You can establish that criteria by policy. People who live, let me give you an example. People who live west of the river get assigned to West. People who don't get assigned to Central. That's an assignment policy.
All right, thank you. And I wanted to, if there's something that was in statute or RSA that says this is how you determine what is the school maintained, if that's the right word, compared to whether, or the school board in their wisdom can decide on yearly on, because the school board could change their definition of what school is going to be the school we're assigning. So that's the point I wanted to get across, that it's not written in stone by state.
Thank you. Mr. Pearl.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion that the Hooksett School Board use the term school of record to denote the school that we are assigning our children to by default.
I'll second that.
I think this would, as Dr. Littlefield said, it was a made-up term and so forth. This way we could kind of galvanize that as our default school of assignment. I believe school maintained is in the statutes, and perhaps we could get that definition, put the two side by side so everybody could kind of see those two. But I think it would be good to clarify that, because there has been some confusion around the two terms.
With regard to that statement, it's a statement that I think has been used over the years. I think what has happened is when it has had to be defined, that's where we got into problems with regard to it. Okay,
And if anyone has any further definition, I just thought we should kind of stake a definition out now so that our further discussions will be based upon a common understanding of what that word means here at this board.
Yeah, I'll speak to the second. I think that is just all it does, is really just clarifies that. So, I mean, if we're going to,
right,
we're going to have this debate on,
certainly. Could I ask the secretary, would you bring that motion over again?
David Pearl motion that the school board use the term school of record to be the school the district is assigning students by default.
Okay, everyone ready for that motion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Seeing none? Okay. Moving right along. Are there other items
Madam
that?
Chair?
Yes.
I'd like to follow Mr. Pearl's motion, and just the motion would read, our school of record for default assignment would require the school to be able to accept all of our students.
I'll second that.
The reason I think that's important is just like we were drawing that distinction up here on the board. If this board decided we were going to make Bow our school of record, which means by default we would assign all students to Bow, but we already know that Bow doesn't have enough capacity to hold our students, it wouldn't make any sense. So I think if right away we narrow that down so that our school of record at least can take all of the students, it's a benefit for a school to hold all of our children, because they will get bumped up, if you will, in our status of being in a position to accept all of our students by default.
Any other discussion?
yeah, I'll jump in. I was okay with the setting the term of school of record in terms of, because we've executed that, in terms of limiting ourselves before we've even gone into what we could possibly have for a contract and such. I'm a little leery about setting anything in stone in terms of that. I'd like a little bit more flexibility. And I understand that the need, I always say, in especially negotiating, there's a need for balancing the tension. Creativity, you know.
Wiggle room.
Yeah, wiggle room, yeah. Balancing creativity with discipline. And I think it might be premature at this moment.
Yes, Amy?
I really don't see a need. You wouldn't make a school of record a school that couldn't take all the kids.
Right. Mike, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I agree. I don't, I mean, I think it should be kind of understood that your school of record would be the school that can handle all your kids.
Okay.
So I don't really see the benefit of adding it.
Are we all set to vote? Yes, Mr. Liscars.
Just want to speak to my motion again. There's been a lot of times I've seen this last year. We made some assumptions, quite a few of them, and if we dictate it in our policy, then we follow the policy. There's no questions at all. I think this board gets into trouble when we make assumptions. We say, well, that could never happen. And then all of a sudden it happens. It's because we didn't have a policy. So that was my only point. I think it's a good idea to define the term, and I think it's a good idea to define the restrictions on the term to prevent us from getting ourselves into any trouble.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Sullivan.
I think it fits in within the motion, the discussion. I'm looking at this that we need to obtain all the thoughts that we have and questions, and I think the past mistakes have been that we're making motions on certain aspects without knowing the consequences of having the whole pie. We're making motions one piece of the pie at a time. I think we need all the information. I think once we obtain that information, which was some of the unknowns and what-ifs that weren't answered that caused confusion, certainly for me, attending all these meetings, I think once we do that, I think that would be a perfectly good motion, but at this point, I think we should get all the information out there so we know how this motion will affect this motion, how this will affect the record, school record versus the maintain. So I'm inclined to vote for it, but not at this point.
Good point. Are we ready to vote, or is anyone else wishing to jump in? All those in favor of defining the school of record to mean that they have they will accept all our students, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose?
No.
Okay.